Krishna Tiranachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Shri Krishna Caitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Radha Shri Vasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada. Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Shri Prabhupada ki jai, Hari Nam Sankirtan Yaki ki jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai. Jai Jai Sri Caitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jai Jai Sri Caitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jai Jai Sri Caitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. 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 Reading from the the Sri Caitanya Caritamrta, Antya Lila, chapter 11, the passing of Haridas Thakur, text 43. Madhyana karite Prabhu chalile apane. Madhyana karite Prabhu chalile apane. Madhyana karite Prabhu chalila apane. Madhyana karite Prabhu chalila apane. Ishvara dikhiya kali divina darshane. Ishvara dikhiya kali Majana karite Prabhu chalile apane. Majana karite Prabhu chalile apane. Ishvara dikhiya kale divena darshane. Ishvara dikhiya kale divena darshane. Majana karite Prabhu chalile apane. Ishvara dikya kale divena darshane. Ishvara dikya kale divena darshane.
Madhyana karite Prabhu chalila apane.
Madhyana karite Prabhu chalila apane.
Ishvara dikya kale divena darshane.
Ishvara dikya kale divena darshane.
Madhyana karite Prabhu chalila apane.
Madhyana karite Prabhu chalila apane.
Ishvara dikya kali divina darshane.
Ishvara dikya kale divena darshane. Ladies.
Madhyana karite Prabhu chalila apane.
Madhyana karite Prabhu chalila apane.
Ishvara dekhiya kali divena darshane.
Ishvara dikya kale divena darshane.
Madhyana karite Prabhu chalila apane.
Madhyana karite Prabhu chalila apane.
Ishvara dekhiya kali divena darshane.
Ishvara dikya kale divena darshane.
Madhyana karite Prabhu chalila apane.
Madhyana karite Prabhu chalila apane.
Ishvara dekhiya kali divena darshane.
Ishvara dikya kale divena darshane. Madhyana karite. Madhyana karite. To perform his noon duties. To perform his noon duties. Prabhu. Prabhu. Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu. Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu. Chalilapane. Chalilapane. Aroused himself. Aroused himself. Ishvaradikya. Ishvaradikya. After visiting Lord Jagannath. After visiting Lord Jagannath. Kale. Kale. Tomorrow. Tomorrow. Divena. Divena. Darshana. Darshana. He would see Haridas Thakur. He would see Haridas Thakur. Translation. Because he had to perform his noon duties, Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu got up to leave, but it was settled that the following day, after he saw Lord Jagannath, he would return to visit Haridas Thakur. So we are in the middle of the chapter, the passing of Haridas Thakur, and last week we discussed how Haridas had at one point expressed to Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu that he said, "My Lord, please grant me one benediction. I know that very soon you will wind up your pastimes, and I do not wish to see that. I do not wish to be there when you disappear from this world. Let me go first." And of course, Haridas was a lot older. He was 35 years older than Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu. So he's an old man, basically saying, "Let me go first," thinking about that his time would come anyway. And then a discussion is between the two. where Lord Caitanya is so obliged to Haridas. He is just feeling that Haridas is such a great devotee. How can he not fulfill his request? But on the other hand, he is also pointing out that, but Haridas, what will I do without you? So for my sake, please stay. Then Haridas comes back and says, my Lord, you have so many wonderful associates. You don't really need one like me. And what kind of devotee anyway? I am just an imitation devotee, a Bhakta Abbas, right? Which we are also knowing about Nam Abbas. And Nam Abbas means the reflection of the holy name, or a dim reflection of the holy name. Dim is it's like not much light. Yeah, so a dim reflection of a devotee, Bhakta Abbas. There we are, all of us. Right? I don't think no exceptions. We can. If Haridas is a Bhakta Abbas, what are we? I don't know. So it's interesting to think about this Bhakta Abbas concept and to sort of like, yeah. But then, still there is the unlimited mercy of Caitanya Mahaprabhu, that this Krishna consciousness has come into our lives, that somehow or other there is a whole movement where the topmost knowledge is very carefully preserved and available. And who are we to deal with these finer sentiments of Krishna and his pure devotees, the gopis in Vrindavan? What can we understand about such things? And still, it is all that knowledge is revealed to us about the finer transcendental sentiments. So Haridas was requesting, in the previous verse he says, my Lord, you're always affectionate to your devotees. I'm just an imitation devotee, but nevertheless I wish that you fulfill my desire. That is my expectation. And then we've come to today's verse, where Lord Caitanya had to leave, but said, for noon duties, but said he would return the next day. Tabe Mahaprabhu tara kariya lingan, majana karite samudra karali karila gaman. After embracing him, Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu left to perform his noon duties and went to the sea to take his bath. So these noon duties are being emphasized. And the noon duties was not just about taking a bath. The noon duties is about chanting the Gayatri mantra, and before that is done, take a bath. Sometimes they ask when to chant Gayatri, and one answer is on the sandhyas, on the joints, right, of the day and the night in the morning, when the light of the day is there and yet still a star is to be seen in the sky, so it says, or at noon or in the evening. But Srila Prabhupada also answered that question in a different way by saying after bath, right? After bath, because he would take these 3 baths, right, throughout the day, and in this way, yes, he would chant Gayatri naturally after bath. And that's what he did. That is what Srutakirti said Prabhupada would. When would Prabhupada chant his Gayatri? He said sometimes Prabhupada was a little early. Prabhupada would take after his bath. He would chant Gayatri after his bath. Anyway, so these are the noon duties that Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu went to perform. Gayatri then was not just something that was quickly mumbled, in a few minutes, and then back to regular activity. No, it was actually, at least in Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's life, it was a meditation. It was a serious. It was a moment of reflection. Pratyakale Ishwar dekhe Shabbe Bhaktalaya Haridas Dekite Shigra Kareya. The next morning, after visiting the Jagannath temple, Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu, accompanied by all his devotees, went hastily to see Haridas Thakur. Haridas Rage Ashi Dila Darshan Haridas Vandila Prabhu Hare Vaishnav Charana. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and the devotees came before Haridas Thakur, who offered his respects to the lotus feet of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and all the Vaishnavas. So Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu also assembled the Vaishnavas for the disappearance of Haridas Thakur. In the same way, Srila Prabhupada, at the end of his life, expressed that he wanted all the devotees to come and to be present. And that news made it a little slow to the devotee community, so not everyone made it. But still, that is what Prabhupada desired, and that is the way a Vaishnava is leaving this world. We saw in the example in Bhagavatam of Bhishma Dev, and we saw that many personalities assembled, right? And they were there. Krishna also went for the departure of Bhishma Dev. We see the departure of Maharaj Pariksit, that many sages are assembling on the bank of the Ganga, just for the sake of being there when a great devotee is leaving this world. That is a special, very auspicious moment, actually. That is an amazing thing, because death appears gloomy. After all, there is that uncertainty. That's like, what's going to happen? That's the problem with death, is that it's irreversible, and then what happens after that? And that has been discussed at length in the history of the world. You know, we can go to the Hades, right, to the Greek tradition, and we cross somewhere, some river, some in the underworlds, so that question, what happens after death, has puzzled man, and many thoughts have been expressed about that. For an ordinary person, death is indeed very cruel. Death is just cutting right through whatever was there, all the loving relationships that existed, everything that we were doing, all the good things we were trying to achieve, and there is cruel death just in the middle of it, unfinished, everything. Yeah, slash. The Grim Reaper, as they call it. Yes, all that's going on. So, death has been, I've been thinking about death. There's this painting, medieval painting about death and his agents, and basically killing everyone. That's the painting. And it's like death and his angels are coming, and there are no survivors. They just grab everyone, and okay. So I have sort of sketched enough about the gruesome feature of death now. But then how different it is when a Vaishnava who has dedicated his life to the service of the Lord, who has lived a faultless life, who has lived a life simply in devotional service, when such a Vaishnava is leaving, it is a totally different thing. It is very auspicious. Think for a moment of Dhruva Maharaj, and how when death appeared before Dhruva Maharaj, death came personified, and death offered obeisances. Just at that same moment, a Vaikuntha plane also appeared, and Dhruva stepped on the head of death and used it as a step to get into the Vaikuntha plane. And in this way, death simply became a vehicle to go to the spiritual world. So death was not at all gruesome. Death was simply, it was part of an auspicious journey. And that is the Vaishnava. So knowing well who Haridas Thakur was, and that Haridas Thakur was a faultless person, and knowing very well that Haridas Thakur had only one interest, to chant the holy name of the Supreme Lord, and that he fully realized that the holy name is non-different from the Supreme Lord. And that therefore Haridas was always, every single moment, absorbed in service to the Lord, in glorification of the Lord. So this is avyakta kalatvam. This is not wasting a moment. Nama sada gana ruchi, to always chant the holy name with great taste. So Haridas was embodying all these qualities, and therefore Haridas was, although he was in the material world, he was at the same time a resident of the spiritual world. Iha yasya haridasya karmana manasagira nikala swapya rastasu jivan mukta sa uchite. He was a jivan mukta, a liberated soul. Atasi Krishna namadi nabhavat grayam indriye sevun mukhe jivado swayam spurati ada. He was, due to the fact that he was always glorifying the Supreme Personality of Godhead with his mouth, therefore spurati ada, therefore he was always connected to the transcendental form of the Lord in every situation. And that was always in the forefront, Krishna. Krishna in the forefront, not in the background, not somewhere where we become overwhelmed by material circumstances. I mean, Krishna is also still there, but the material circumstances are just overwhelming. And when we say something like about that, well, Krishna should be in the center, say, well, what can I do? I'm not so advanced. No, then that's the wrong answer. When the answer is, I'm not so advanced, no, then the correct answer should be, I choose not to be so advanced. I choose not to focus on Krishna. It's my choice. We have that choice. I simply have chosen to not make Krishna the priority. He's there. How can I ever forget Krishna consciousness? Oh no. This is part of my life. Yes. No, that's not good enough. That's really, that won't do. It is, Krishna has to be our primary focus. That is the idea. That is the call of the Caitanya Caritamrta. That is what we're reading. That is what we're studying. It's not just, well, today we're talking about a funeral. Welcome. Good morning. The topic for the day is a funeral. The funeral of Haridas Thakur. Yes, that's not the point. That's not the point. It's the essence of the story is not the moment that Haridas actually leaves his body, and then we get this situation. His body is washed in the ocean. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu personally does it, and then they make a hill of sand over his body and so on. And so basically a funeral. But that's not the essence of the chapter. The essence of the chapter is Haridas's his constant absorption in remembering Krishna, in Sravanam, Kirtanam, Smaranam, in hearing, chanting and remembering. And not just hearing, chanting and remembering as a sadhana. All right, yes, I know, we should get more serious about hearing, chanting and remembering. No. The hearing, chanting and remembering is his life and soul. That is the juice in his life. Hearing about Krishna, what is more wonderful? He would go to the house of Advaita Acharya to hear the lectures of Advaita Acharya. He would do. And he would also, and he would chant his 300,000 names. Haridas Thakur. So his complete absorption. Blissful hearing. The hearing was a source of happiness which would fuel his chanting, right? Made his chanting, which awakened his love. And then as a result of the hearing and chanting, his absorption, his remembrance would be deeper and deeper. Just as Srila Prabhupada is describing how he was translating Srimad Bhagavatam and writing the purports, and that writing these purports were his transcendental ecstasies, his moment of deep absorption in Krishna. Oh yes, in the day, dealing with a movement, dealing with the interest of the movement, answering letters, so many letters Prabhupada answered, and really like in detail, not just a quick, okay, received your letter, thank you very much, yes, very nice. No, deep responses, point for point, or giving instructions. So many letters, so many lectures, meeting so many people, meeting so many important people, being ready to traveling to so many places. Prabhupada was in New York. Prabhupada was not well. He developed a cold. And there's a series of recordings, and you can hear how the cold is progressing in the lectures. The first day, it's like a very wet cold, right? It's like lots of sniffle and sneeze and this, and then the cold is drying up, right? And it's going inside. You can hear it. Yeah, his voice gets a little hoarse like that. And then the devotees, they said, "Oh, Prabhupada, just stay a little longer and just recover." Prabhupada says, "No, I have to go. I have to go to London." I said, "But Prabhupada, you don't have to travel." And Prabhupada said, "If I don't travel, who will deliver you?" So, like that, so absorbed. If we are reading this chapter, and if we are reading the chapter of Bhishma Dev, we find certain parallels, right, between these two chapters, because we find that at the pastime of Bhishma Dev, the departure, Krishna personally was there, and that Bhishma Dev personally focused his eyes on the Supreme Lord and then gave up his body. And we see that Haridas saying the Supreme Lord was personally there, and Haridas focused on the Supreme Lord. And then we see Srila Prabhupada, and we see that Srila Prabhupada had the same kind of focus, just like Haridas Thakur was always hearing, chanting and remembering. And Prabhupada was always hearing, chanting and remembering Krishna. And yes, and of course, Krishna was there. Krishna was there at every moment. And on many occasions, Prabhupada was communicating with Krishna. For example, there's a story in New Vrindavan how Srila Prabhupada pointed at a hill and said, "Oh, look, Radha and Krishna are dancing on the hill." Yeah. Prabhupada would see all these things that ordinary people wouldn't see. Just a hill, okay, there's a hill. Radhadesh, there's also a hill. But did we ever see Radha Krishna dancing on the hill? I didn't yet. I go over that hill every day, but didn't see them there. But they're dancing down the hill. That I can see. Yes, that's visible. But on the hill I haven't seen. So, like this, somehow or other, whether we can see the deity dancing or whether our vision extends further. And we can actually see Krishna dancing on the hill. Doesn't matter. Both are equal because both are Krishna. So just seeing the deities is sufficient, is also the direct darshan of Krishna. Srila Prabhupada, throughout his life, was with Krishna. Srila Prabhupada was always hearing, chanting, remembering Krishna with deep love and is our inspiration. So let us continue and let us see what is going on with Haridas Thakur. Prabhu Kaya Haridas Kaya Samachar Haridas Kaya Prabhu Ye Kripa Tomar. Samachar means news. Lord Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu inquired, "My dear Haridas, what is the news?" Haridas Thakur replied, "My Lord, whatever mercy you can bestow upon me." In other words, there was no news at all. There was no change. Haridas was just still fixed on that point where the last conversation had ended. "My Lord, please grant me this benediction that I may leave before you. My Lord." And so Haridas simply said, "My Lord, whatever mercy you can bestow upon me." Angane arambila Prabhu Mahasankirtan Vakreshwar Pandita Caritamrta. Upon hearing this, Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu immediately began great congregational chanting in the courtyard. Vakreshwar Pandit was the chief dancer. It is said that Vakreshwar Pandit is a great transcendental personality who once danced for 72 hours. And so Lord Chaitanya was just so impressed. And he said, "My dear Vakreshwar," he said, "if I would have two of you," he said, "you are like one of my wings. If I would have two of you, I would be able to fly." Right? In other words, this dancing of Vakreshwar Pandit was not just dancing, it was touching the heart of Caitanya Mahaprabhu. It was touching the heart of all the devotees. I mean, when Vakreshwar danced, everyone just became jubilant. Everyone just became happy. So Vakreshwar's dancing was not just, okay, and then there was a kirtan, and then there was some dancing going on. Yeah, we also have. Yeah, but this was a level like this was Vakreshwar Pandit. And he was not just a dancer. I mean, we have dancers, but he was one of the wings of Caitanya Mahaprabhu. Therefore, the chief dancer. This dancing was not just about moves, making a certain move, a certain step. It was an expression of ecstasy. It was an expression of great ecstasy. Swarup Kushayadi Yata Prabhurgan Haridasa Bedi Karinama Sankirtan. Headed by Swarup Damodar Goswami, all the devotees of Caitanya Mahaprabhu surrounded Haridas Thakur and began congregational chanting. So, Swarup Damodar Goswami had been given that name particularly because he was a very sweet singer. And Lord Chaitanya was appreciating that Swarup Damodar, by his sweet singing, could bind the Lord. Yes. So that his singing was so powerful and so sweet that it could bind the Lord, and therefore he was Damodar. He was Damodar. He could bind the Lord by his singing. That's why he got that name, Damodar. So, and there's the personification of the one who can bind the Lord by this incredible singing. Of course, Swarup Damodar is the mysterious devotee. He is the mysterious devotee in the pastimes of Lord Chaitanya because he is a little bit in the background. We have Rupa and Sanatana. Yes. Rupa Goswami is described as the Ras Acharya, the teacher of all the mellows of devotional service. He is described as the perfect replica of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Then Raghunath Das Goswami, he's describing Sanatan Goswami in the Vilapa Kusum Manjalani. He's describing that Sanatan Goswami is the Sambandha Acharya, the Acharya who gives us the connection, Sambandha, Abhideya and Prayojan. So, and that particularly, he gives us this connection with Krishna consciousness, and that he explains to us the basic tattva of Krishna consciousness. So like this, all the acharyas in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's, among Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's associates are identified as the great leaders. Without the 6 Goswamis, what advancement can be made? Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami says. But then there's Swarup Damodar. And Swarup Damodar Goswami is he seems to be the leader of all. And he is the secretary, the private secretary of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. But not the kind of secretary that books appointments. Although, if you want to book an appointment, you do have to see Swarup Damodar. But it's not about scheduling, right? As secretaries are expert at scheduling, and it's really good if you have such a secretary to manage your life, because you'll find you'll get a lot more done. But that was not what Swarup Damodar was doing. Swarup Damodar was like the spiritual master of all the other Vaishnavas. And Swarup Damodar was virtually speaking the foremost authority amongst Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's associates. And that is kind of amazing. Now, in the Gaura Ganadhesh Deepika, you can always look behind, because it's the who is who, right? Book which describes who the associates of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu were in Krishna Lila. So Gaura Ganadhesh Deepika is saying Vishaka, but then Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said, no, not Vishaka, Lalita. So we're accepting Swarup Damodar Goswami as a manifestation of Lalita. And Lalita and Vishaka, who are here on the altar, they are the principal associates of Radha and Krishna. And of them, Lalita is the leader of the two. So therefore Lalita is the primary associate of Radha and Krishna, and the primary assistant of Lalita is Rupa Manjari, who is none other than Rupa Goswami. So now we see that there's a whole internal link there, which also somehow or other is manifesting. So that hierarchy exists. So having for a moment looked at the more internal hierarchy, we can appreciate that how important it is that these personalities are there. How could Vakreshwar Pandit dance 72 hours? Was it human? Can any human dance 72 hours? 72 minutes is sort of like, I mean, if we dance for 72 minutes, then a little break, right? And eat something, right? Just a little break, little snack after 72 minutes, 72 hours dancing, even staying up 72 hours. This is like, who has ever been awake for 72 hours? It's like, you have. Oh. Almost a month, insomnia. Yes. But that is not real, because then there are still moments that we switch off. Even in insomnia, we don't sleep, but we drift away. But 72 hours completely awake, completely in active waking consciousness, that doesn't exist on the material plane. That only exists on the transcendental plane. Just like last week there was someone who said, "No, I didn't sleep for a moment in the lecture." No, well. Yeah. Sure, everyone could see it, hear it, and okay, that's it. But only in pure transcendental consciousness can one have that level of being awake. For Vakreshwar Pandit, 72 hours awake and dancing in ecstasy. He is in the Gauraganada's Deepika described as an incarnation of Ksirodakshaya Vishnu. So he's not just even Jiva Tattva anymore, puts him in the Vishnu Tattva category. Yeah, then 72 hours becomes realistic, you know. I mean, right? Then, okay. So, who are we looking at here? We're looking at Vakreshwar Pandit as the dancer. We're looking at Swarup Damodar Goswami, Lalita herself, being present there. I mean, where are we? Is this Golokira Premadana Harinam Sankirtana? Is this the spiritual world that has descended on earth? And here is Haridas, Lord Brahma, and at the same time, he is Prahlad. We discussed how we think that the second person is manifesting through the first, is manifesting within the consciousness of the first. It is Lord Brahma. Haridas is Lord Brahma. That is the jiva that he is. But the personality, Prahlad, is also manifesting through him in his consciousness, using him as an instrument. Just as we can be the instrument of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who can work through us, and one becomes a Shakti Avesh, avatar of the Supreme Lord. Right? And the Supreme Lord is manifesting through the jiva. And the jiva then becomes practically divine. There's this, you know, like I was driving in South Africa and I come past a property of some boer, of a farmer, you know, from Dutch descent, who had a big cross on his land, and a big sign under it is, Jesus is Lord. Right? You know, Jesus is Lord. Yes, so well, this has been a big debate actually in history, right? We have in our library upstairs, which I share with Rupa Sanatan, we have a book which is called When Jesus Became God, right? It's a Jewish author. To add a colorful detail. But leaving that all aside, when he became God, and yes, that question. So for some, Jesus was a great teacher, right? The Son of God, but not God. And then it's described others, they saw Jesus as God. And then there's friction and all kinds of pastimes. A few people are killed in the process. Leaving that for what it is, that little bit of history. Yes, but then we would probably, as Hare Krishnas, generally take the position in the debate that Jesus is the Son of God. He's not God, he's the Son of God. But today I have no problem to tell you, no, he's not just the Son of God, he is also God, right? But the question is, how is he God? And he is God as a Shakti Avesh avatar. That the supreme, he is a living being, but the full divine power of the Lord is actually manifest within him. And in this way, he is non-different from God as a Shakti Avesh avatar, and therefore he's counted as an avatar, as God descended, because avatar means that God descended. So in that sense, one could say he is God. Therefore, to the boor, I will say, all right, Jesus is Lord, but how is he Lord? Right? Then the boor will look at me like, huh? Yeah, well, that's okay. But read this, and you will understand. So it is interesting. But here now we are looking at this pastime of Haridas Thakur, Golo Kira Premadana Harinam Sankirtana. This is the Sankirtan movement of Lord Caitanya, descended from the spiritual world, and all these personalities, they are not from here. And yet they are with us here in this material world and giving us this, this association. And performing these amazing activities. So yes, all the devotees knew, here is Haridas Thakur. Who is more exalted than him? Who can chant like he chants? Everyone was chanting, but no one could chant like Haridas. Oh, and everyone came for that final moment where Haridas was returning back to Godhead. There is also the story of Tukaram, and then there is a film made about Tukaram. I like that film, actually. It's from the 1930s, and then at the end, Tukaram goes back to Godhead, and there is actually the Vaikuntha plane, like a bird, big bird coming, and Tukaram sits in the plane and it takes off and he goes back to Godhead and he flies back to the spiritual world. And yes, that's the result. That's the result of chanting. So Haridas, of course, was was just such a transcendental personality like Srila Prabhupada. These personalities, you cannot glorify them by saying, and then he went back to Godhead. That would be like minimizing these personalities, because they never left Godhead for a moment. They were always with Godhead at every moment of their life. So it's not like, and then, the climax, then they went back to Godhead. No, they were always there. So everyone knew that. And therefore there was no doubt that Haridas was now going to resume his eternal position in the spiritual world. Which may raise questions like, is Lord Brahma then eternally residing in the spiritual world? Well, then we see that here is Lord Brahma is also a Shakti Avesh avatar. It's not just an ordinary jiva. He is also a divinely empowered living being. So we also see descriptions of the demigods being present in the spiritual world. We see that described in Brihad Bhagavatamrita. We see it also described in the Garga Samhita. So yes, if we go to such books, then we we see hints of that as well. So whatever may be, these personalities are, or did Lord Brahma now attain the ultimate perfection when he actually went back to Godhead? Whatever may be, the Lord Brahma of this era of this particular day of Brahma, is a pure devotee of the Lord, right? And is always with Krishna. Brihad Bhagavatamrita describes how Lord Brahma also has an altar, and that he's always engaged in puja on his altar. But on his altar, there's not like a deity carved of some material like here, but there's actually a living form of the Lord. And that living form of the Lord is on the altar of Lord Brahma, personally there, and Lord Brahma is personally worshipping him. They're close. They're pretty close. We know that. And we also know at the time of Lord Brahma is at one point, after all his meditation on the lotus flower, at one point Lord Brahma got the darshan of the Supreme Lord. And when they met, there was a handshake. Yeah, that's also in the Bhagavatam. The original handshake between the Lord and Lord Brahma. I really like that. You can read in Wikipedia or something the origin of the handshake. Somewhere in the Middle Ages, there was this custom of showing that a man had no weapon, and then he would just shake hands, so you could trust him. Yeah. And they say, that's where it comes from. Saying, no, that's rubbish. It comes from, the intimate exchange between Lord Narayan and Lord Brahma, who shook hands. So yes, how wonderful, how transcendental is all this knowledge. And here we are witnessing the transcendental departure of Haridas Thakur. And next week we can continue with text number 50. And in this way we are deeply meditating on the departure of the great Vaishnavas who are going back to Godhead, and by witnessing we can also develop more faith, right? So that we can also finally give up our fear, because death is a little gruesome. Remember at the beginning, I was painting some pictures, the bony hand around your throat. Oh yes. So the gruesome side of death still can be a little fearful. Coronavirus. Will a mask protect you? Or will it protect others from you? Anyway, all these things, yeah. So maybe hearing about Haridas can help us to overcome that fear of death, just a little bit more. Therefore, we are continuing our meditation on the passing of Haridas Thakur. Thank you very much. Any questions or comments?
Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you very much. I had a question relating to the personification of death. And
the personification of death?
The personification of death. For example, as you had mentioned that Dhruva Maharaj stepped on death when he was.
Mm-hmm.
And then we also very often here when death is being described, we also see the descriptions of Yamaraj.
Yama.
And then Srila Prabhupada also says that if one does not surrender to Krishna, then he meets Krishna as death. So how do we understand the personification of death in that case?
Yeah, the personification of death. Yamaraj is the agent of death. Yamaraj is sometimes described as personification of death because being the agent of death, when you see Yamaraj, you're seeing death. So Yama has been sometimes described as synonymous with death. Other times, though, we see that Yamaraj may rather be the agent of death. And ultimately, we understand Krishna is death because Krishna is everything, and Krishna is also Antakala, Antakala, the end of time. So, as Vaishnavas, we are looking at the Adipurush, the original source of everything, Sarva Karana Karana. We're looking at Krishna. The form of death that appeared before Dhruva Maharaj, was that Yamaraj? We don't see any reference like that. So I would certainly not be inclined to say that was Yama. I would take it that death came in a particular form before Dhruva. And nowhere it's mentioned in the commentaries or in Prabhupada's purports. Yama was death who appeared there. So it appears that death takes also a form separate from Yamaraj. Yes. But ultimately, like we discussed, and so you also mentioned, the three, death personified, Yamaraj, and Krishna. And I mentioned the same you mentioned. And I said, but for us Vaishnava, it's Krishna. We look at Krishna. When we look at death, we see Krishna. Mritya sarvarashitsaham. I am come as death and takes everything away. So for us, death is Krishna. And we're seeing Krishna. And so at that moment, we remember. And Prabhupada would say, he was eating kachoris in Calcutta and the bomb alarm went off and he didn't go into the shelter. Then he saw the bombs. So Prabhupada would speak about that later, about the bombs. He said, and when the bombs come to kill you, then I'd say, yes, and here comes Krishna to kill me in the form of a bomb. So Prabhupada would see Krishna as death. And that's our meditation. So if we try to go deeper and deeper, as what is the form of death? I think for us the essence is Krishna when we think of death, because that's where we connect. Death is where we connect to Krishna. Therefore, we are focusing on death as Krishna, because then we connect with Krishna. And that's the essence. So, therefore, death is Krishna. Two.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Maharaj. My question is about end of your lecture.
End of my lecture.
Very end. You said questions or comments. So my question is about the comments. I'm writing one article about question and comments, and I don't get when did we introduce the comments at the end of Bhagavatam?
When to introduce a comment? Well,
And why?
I'm about to answer. It's very simple. It's not complicated. it depends on who the speaker is. If Srila Prabhupada is the speaker, what will any of us comment? We'll be quiet. Right? If it's a speaker like that caliber, then there will be no one would dare to comment, because a Vaishnava of lesser caliber, what could they comment? They can only question. So comments become more relevant amongst equals. Yes. Sometimes though, we bring a comment of something we have read. Yeah? So you spoke about this and this topic, I've read these and these things, I bring a comment. But if we start to volunteer too much comment to seniors, right, then we may miss to hear the realization of the seniors. So it's better we try to question, to ask when we deal with seniors, because we may get more. We may bring out more realization out of the whole thing. So Vaishnava etiquette kicks in, and it's not about now Maryada Vyatikram, which means transgressing the Vaishnava etiquette, and that it's inappropriate to ask a comment, or is it appropriate to ask a comment. You can bring in Maryada Vyatikram in your article, but it goes beyond that. It goes about that the Dharmasya Tattvanitam Guhayam, you can bring that one in, that the truth remains hidden in the heart of the devotees, and that the humble and submissive inquiry of a person brings out all kinds of realization out of the heart of the speaker. Therefore, when we deal with senior Vaishnavas, particularly, we want to question, we want to ask. Even Maharaj Pariksit said, he asked questions about the creation. You think he didn't know about the creation? You think he was uneducated? He was a king, he's highly educated in Vedic literature. He knew everything about the creation. He could have given you a complete explanation, but he was trying to get more realization out of Sukadeva Goswami. And so in this way, comment, question, but of course, the scripture is there, and sometimes we share something. Someone says, well, I read actually recently in such and such a book something on this topic, and it's spot on. Yeah, oh, very nice. Just like we're talking about something like Tulsi, and then someone says, oh, I just read in the Padma Purana that all the holy places of the whole universe are in one Tulsi leaf. Well, that would be a nice comment, wouldn't it? Like Tulsi. So, even a junior person can bring that to the discussion. But still, especially if lectures are going on in a Vaishnava community where all are sort of peers on equal level, yes, then discussion becomes more and more relevant. Yeah. Then there may be more discussion. So these are some of the dynamics. These are not like lines carved in stone. These are a little fluid, but these are the dynamics. That's why I use the word dynamics. Purna Tattva.
Thank you very much for your insights. You said that Lord Brahma shook hands with Narayan. Shook hands. So, where is that in the scripture? It's my first question. In Bhagavatam? I read over it. And second, actually, because they have four hands both, so they're like...
Were they shaking four hands? No, that is not no.
Which hand?
Yeah, the right one, not the wrong one. Yeah, that was one hand. Yeah.
Thank you.
Interesting word. I also have a mind like you have. It also comes up with all kinds of funny questions. But these kind of practical thinks, wait a minute, but they have foreheads. He has foreheads, and how does that work? My mind also thinks like that sometimes. It gets a little difficult, right? When we are going from our current situation, trying to imagine how that all takes place. But the Bhagavatam clearly describes the handshake. Yeah. Yes.
Thank you very much.
You mentioned there's a book that when did Jesus become God?
Yeah.
I guess we could also level, or those could level, when did Lord Caitanya become God?
Yes. Yeah, that question may also be raised, of course, and of course, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami is trying to answer that question, that Lord Chaitanya did not become God, but that he always was the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and he provides evidence for that. The evidence is there's scriptural evidence, then there are miracles, like in the Adi Lila, we find the divinity of the Lord comes out in all the transcendental miracles that happen around him and through him and so on. And we see miracles, Jarikanda, all the animals are dancing. So there are miracles. And then we see the greatest miracle, that love of God that Lord Chaitanya shows. And that's what the CC is really about. And several times devotees are saying, how could anyone show such levels of love of God? Oh, he must be the Supreme Lord. He must be. And he comes to show that miracle of love of God. So he is the Supreme Lord, but in his most merciful incarnation, who shows what has never been shown before, that amazing, amazing, amazing quality of love of God, in great detail. So yes, he always is God, always was, always is, and always will be the Supreme Lord. Yes.
Thank you for your nice class, Guru Maharaj. You mentioned SR, yes.
Yeah, as on.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Guru Maharaj. You mentioned that Haridas Thakur is Brahma, and he also is Prahlad. And maybe you explained, but I was on the altar, I didn't hear it.
I explained.
Yes.
I said he is Brahma, and Prahlad also manifests through him.
Can you elaborate a little bit on this part of he is Prahlad?
I said Prahlad also manifests through him. I didn't say he is Prahlad. He is Lord Brahma, and Prahlad also manifests through him. So, as the Lord can manifest through through a devotee, the great, eternally liberated devotees are so powerful that they can also do all kinds of amazing things like that. So we can see, just like for example in the Bhagavatam it's mentioned that Narada Muni, he is empowered as much as the super soul, and therefore Narada Muni knows what all the living beings think. I have enough with my own mind. I'd have to know everyone else's mind. But Narada Muni does. He's so empowered, so empowered. So we have to understand these eternally liberated personalities are so empowered that they also can actually manifest in someone else's consciousness, through someone else's consciousness. And in this way, we see that Haridas also has that mood of Prahlad, and he tolerates everything. Prahlad tolerates all the torture of Hiranyakasipu, and Haridas tolerate the whipping in 22 marketplaces. And there that mood of Prahlad is very much manifest. Like that. Okay, Purna Tattva is the last comment. Yes.
Yes, because the devotee are so much empowered that they can manifest through another person. But we see that ordinary ghost can also do this. isn't? So even ghosts can manifest themselves through other persons.
Yeah, that's the perverted reflection. Yeah, there's always a perverted reflection also. So it always reflects further down into onto the lower level also. Yeah, so there it also exists. Yeah. Okay, well, on this high note, one should end on a high note, so I think it's a great end. Thank you very much. Kija.
Kadamba Swami ki.